Today we will be comparing Sony A7 III and Panasonic GH5, maybe the two most popular mirrorless cameras ever. Neither of these is a new release, so I will focus on the main differences between these two, and I will try to make a short guide on how should one decide between these two cameras in 2019. I will also talk about how relevant are these cameras for hybrid use, photography, indie filmmaking, and content creation in 2019. I will start by saying that both are great cameras, and I definitely think that both of these are definitely worth considering in 2019. I believe that both GH5 and A7 III were ahead of the time at the time of the release in many ways. GH5 has been significantly improved by firmware updates, and A7 III will also get big firmware update in April. GH5 is larger camera. It is mostly a matter of product philosophy. It has smaller sensor than Sony, but also more features and more controls. Panasonic is generally trying to provide a camera which is easy or even fun to handle. Sony on the other hand is master of packaging. They can put incredible amount of technology in very small camera body. It still has very good physical controls. Personally, I like both approaches, and most of the real-world size and weight difference depends on the lens anyway. Both are very well built cameras. Both use magnesium frame and both feel solid. Panasonic probably has an edge in terms of the build quality, mostly because of the weather sealing. Both cameras are weather sealed, but the A7 III has a weak point on the bottom side, but it will survive a reasonable amount of abuse. The most fundamental difference between these two cameras is the sensor size. This won't be another full frame versus micro four thirds video, but in both cases it determines how the rest of the camera is built around that sensor. Sony A7 III has incredible backside illuminated full frame sensor with excellent dynamic range and outstanding low light capabilities. In these two regards, it is still the market leader. GH5 has 20.2 megapixel micro four thirds sensor. The main advantage of this sensor is how it enables the camera to be built around it. It produces less heat, it has lower requirements for processing power, it leaves more space for the in-body image stabilization, and so on. On A7 III, you can generally go up to ISO 12800, ISO 25600 is in case of emergency option. On the GH5, ISO 3200 is as high as I would go. If you really need to, you can use ISO 6400, but I would only do that in low dynamic range scenes. If you want to use the GH5 in low light situations, you can still do it, but you need to have fast micro four thirds lens, or you can use speed booster and full frame or APS-C lens. Generally, the A7 III is more suitable for low light shooting, of course. Even for my product videos, I can just leave it on ISO 1600 if I don't want to bother with lights, so that is very convenient. In stills, you can recover more information from A7 III RAW files, and you can push it further. Having said that, GH5 also shoots very nice stills, and I find the GH5 dynamic range to be sufficient in vast majority of situations. In video, it is a bit different. Both A7 III and GH5 shoot full sensor 4K, which is in my opinion a necessity for all-round usable hybrid cameras. The GH5 has much more advanced video features. Unlike the A7 III, it can shoot 10-bit 422, 4K 60p and 4K DCI, but only in 24 frames per second. How big of a difference does that make? Regarding the 10-bit, that allows you to extract more color information from the files, and it gives you more creative options. In my experience, it definitely makes a difference, especially in high dynamic range scenes and when you are shooting log. 4K 60p is also very useful for cinematic shots, it looks great, it is very useful for wedding filmmakers, so that is a big advantage of the GH5. A7 III shoots beautiful 4K video as well, of course. The amount of detail is really great on both A7 III and GH5. Even without 10-bit, Sony has very good Cine 4 gamma setting, which is very suitable for post-production. The codec is still pretty solid, so it is generally very suitable for color grading. GH5 can also shoot in MOV and All Intra. There is very little difference between All Intra and long GOP, so I don't use All Intra on the GH5. A ton of great videos has been shot using 8-bit codec, so it is probably not a necessity. Having said that, I think that it should become a standard feature for advanced hybrid cameras in 2019, just like 4K 60p. So big thumbs up to the GH5 for providing both, and it wins in terms of the video features. Sony also has some issues with rolling shutter, resulting in jello effect. It was much improved in comparison with A6500 though. It can be removed in post, but it will significantly increase the rendering time. Panasonic GH5 doesn't have noticeable rolling shutter issues. Regarding the handling, I have talked a lot about that in my previous videos, so here is just a quick summary. GH5 handling is great. I like the grip, there are 3 exposure dials, joystick, well-positioned white balance, ISO and exposure compensation buttons. Besides that, there are well-positioned function buttons, dedicated drive mode dial and so on. The only thing that I don't like is the position of display button, which is very easy to press accidentally. Overall, I think that the GH5 and GH5S handling is great. Sony has made a big improvements to handling in their 3rd generation full-frame cameras, and I can say that physical handling is really good. There are 3 control dials, exposure compensation dial, very well positioned C1 and C2 buttons, more buttons on the 4-way pad and so on. Importantly, there is also a joystick which makes up for limited touch functionality. One thing that I miss on the A7 Mark III is drive mode dial. There is one on the GH5, it also lets you access time-lapse mode, so thumbs up for that. GH5 has slightly better grip, although the grip on A7 Mark III is very well shaped as well. Overall, the handling is better on the GH5. Sony makes up for that by being smaller, so that is a matter of preference. Regarding the autofocus, A7 Mark III still has the best autofocus out of all of the cameras that I've tested on this channel. It is very difficult to fool A7 III autofocus even when I am trying really hard. It uses 693 point system with face detection autofocus points, it is super fast and super accurate, and it has incredible tracking capabilities. That is true for both stills and video. You can also set responsiveness and focus speed, which has significant impact. GH5 autofocus has been significantly improved with newest firmware. It won't match A7 Mark III, but I can say that it is definitely good enough. I use autofocus on the GH5 all the time, and unless I use wrong settings, I haven't had any autofocus footage. The tracking is also impressive. Even if this was shot on A7 Mark III, I would still say that it is a good result. Focusing from close distance to far distance is also very smooth, basically without hunting. In stills, it is also fast and accurate, so even though it is not quite as good as the A7 Mark III, it is definitely good enough. The in-body image stabilization is much better on the GH5. The difference is pretty significant. A7 Mark III in-body image stabilization is good for holding the camera still at wide angles. It still makes a big difference compared to no in-body image stabilization at all. It is not great for walking unless you use ultra-wide lens though. GH5 has very good in-body image stabilization, which helps a lot with non-stabilized lenses. Personally, if I intend to shoot video handheld, I always use Panasonic lens with image stabilization, such as 12 to 60mm Leica. Handheld footage is definitely usable even at longer focal lengths, and it doesn't look distracting at all. It actually changed the way I shoot quite a bit. It is especially useful while traveling because I don't have to carry a tripod, and I greatly appreciate that. Sony can also combine the in-body image stabilization and lens stabilization to some extent, but the result is nowhere near the GH5. In the real-world use, the in-body image stabilization might be the biggest advantage of the GH5 over A7 Mark III for some types of use. GH5 uses very high-resolution 3.68mm viewfinder with 0.76 times magnification. It is very sharp and also very bright. A7 III uses 2.36mm viewfinder with 0.78 times magnification. It is still fine to use, the colors are okay, and it is sufficiently bright. GH5 has better viewfinder overall, even though it is slightly smaller. Regarding the display, GH5 uses 1.62mm 3.2-inch screen. It is also very sharp and very bright. It is a very good screen, fairly usable in sunlight. Sony A7 III has 3-inch screen with 921 million dots. It is okay to use, the brightness is sufficient for outdoor use if you set it to sunny weather. GH5 screen rotates, which is a great feature for vloggers because you can rotate it and see yourself. A7 Mark III screen tilts, which is more suitable for behind the camera use because the screen stays in the center of the camera. I'm okay with both styles. I am behind the camera most of the time, so I might prefer tilting screen. That is a matter of preference though. Panasonic is also much better when it comes to using the external monitor. It works very well on the GH5. On A7 Mark III, you can't see display information on external monitor while you are shooting 4K. Once you start recording on the A7 III, the screen on the camera goes black. Now I use A7 Mark III with Portkeys LH5 monitor because of the remote control features, which are very helpful. I will also make a review of this monitor soon. I have talked a lot about the user interface on both, so here I will just say that it is a big strength of the GH5. It has great quick menu, well organized main menu, and importantly, it is meant to be controlled using the touchscreen. User interface is definitely not a strength of the A7 III. Fortunately, you can customize the quick menu, which helps a lot. Unfortunately, you can't use it for changing video recording settings. Main menu is actually pretty logically organized, but there is a lot of options. You still have to change two settings buried in the main menu to go from 4K 20p to 1080p 100p. My menu also helps a lot since you can put your most used settings there. Touchscreen can't be used to navigate the quick menu or main menu at all. It is possible to live with it and get used to it, but I think that Sony really needs completely new user interface. I really hope that the next Sony mirrorless camera will have proper user interface optimized for the touchscreen. Both cameras have two slots for SD cards, which is great. GH5 has an advantage here because it has two UHS 2 compatible card slots. A7 Mark III has one UHS 2 and one UHS 1 slot. That is still okay, definitely much better than having one slot. The battery life is generally strong on both. Panasonic is rated for 410 shots, A7 Mark III is rated for 710 shots. The battery lasts longer in the A7 Mark III. I was actually able to shoot 3 hours on 4K video on full charge, which is outstanding result. GH5 can shoot about 2 hours on 4K video on single charge, which is still excellent result. Big advantage of Sony is that it can be charged using USB-C or micro USB port, even while it is being used. GH5 unfortunately can't be charged through USB at all. One of the main advantages of full frame is also shallow depth of field. That kind of look could be achieved on Micro Four Thirds, but for that you would need suitable lenses. Achieving that on full frame camera is easier though, because there aren't any zoom lenses for Micro Four Thirds that could compensate for that 2x crop factor. There are Olympus Pro lenses that can give you f2.4 equivalent lens for a huge amount of money and some manual f0.95 lenses. For full frame you can just buy versatile 24 to 70mm f2.8 lens. On the other hand, if you want portability, you can get something like this 12 to 60mm f2.8 to 4 lens for Micro Four Thirds, which will cover most of your needs. So definitely consider the lens selection as well. To sum up, when you are deciding between these two cameras, you basically need to decide which features are more important for you. The biggest advantages of the A7 Mark III are the sensor output, especially in stills, low light performance, autofocus tracking, compact size, and battery life. The main advantages of the GH5 are 10-bit video, 4K 60p, better in-body image stabilization, better handling, screen and viewfinder, and the user interface. The bottom line is that you can create great content using both. Both of these cameras were ahead of competition at the time of release. A7 Mark III and GH5 are definitely valid options in 2019. Getting the right lenses and adjusting your workflow is the key thing here. So regardless of which one you choose, just take it out, shoot some great content, and enjoy the process. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.